The day my parents' will was read, I learned my younger brother inherited their $800,000 mansion in New York, and I got a broken cabin in the middle of Alaska. That same night in our cramped kitchen, my fiancé threw the ring onto the table and called me a pathetic loser. He shouted that I would never amount to anything as he slammed the door so hard the frame shook. For a moment, I believed him. I believed all of them. I thought that was the end of my story. I didn't know it was only the beginning. My name is Olivia Hale, and for most of my life I learned how to disappear in plain sight. I grew up in a family where love was measured in expectations, and expectations were always stacked on my younger brother's side of the scale. Marcus was the star from the moment he could walk loud, charming, impossible to ignore. I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the daughter who blended into the background because that was easier than competing for a spotlight that was never meant for me. I was the kid who brought home a high school essay my teacher called exceptional. I placed it on the dinner table like it was a secret I hoped someone would notice. My father barely glanced at it before turning to Marcus, asking about his next basketball game, already planning the cheers he'd shout from the bleachers. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, a small hidden gesture she hoped would be enough to make up for the silence. It wasn't, but I pretended it was. That pattern never changed. Marcus always moved through life as if doors were built to open for him. I learned to knock softly and wait. He got the newest shoes, the better schools, the praise for things I worked twice as hard to achieve. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself love didn't need to look equal to feel real. I was wrong about that, but it took years to admit it. In my 20s, I built a quiet, steady life in New York. I worked long hours analyzing data, taking pride in the things no one saw: accuracy, patience, stability. I wasn't flashy, but I was reliable, and for a while I believed that was enough. When Daniel came into my life, he said he loved that about me, that I was thoughtful, grounded, different from the people he'd dated before. I held on to those words like they were a promise, but over time, admiration turned into comparison. He'd glance at Marcus's life, his job, his suits, the places he traveled, and ask why I didn't push harder, why I didn't dress the part, why I didn't aim bigger. I laughed it off because that's what I'd been trained to do: swallow the sting, keep the peace. I assumed love meant patience. I didn't realize it could also mean erosion. Then came the will reading. I walked into the attorney's office with a thin thread of hope, the kind of hope you don't admit out loud. Maybe my parents had seen me more clearly than I thought. Maybe my mother had fought for something fair. Marcus strutted in like it was a formality, like he already knew how the story ended. He did. I didn't. He walked away with the New York mansion, 4 bedrooms, high ceilings, sunlight pouring through windows that had always felt like a dream. I walked away with a cabin in Alaska so old the attorney hesitated before sliding the deed across the table. Marcus grinned. I felt the floor tilt, and that was the moment I started to question everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Daniel didn't even wait for me to get home before he started unraveling. He'd already heard from Marcus, of course he had. News traveled fast when it made me look small. When I stepped through the door of our apartment, Daniel was standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed, jaw tight, like he'd been rehearsing a speech he couldn't wait to deliver. "So that's it," he snapped before I could put my bag down. "Your brother gets a mansion and you get—" "What, a shack in the middle of nowhere?" I told him it was a cabin. I didn't tell him my voice shook when I said it. He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that felt like glass hitting the floor. "A cabin, Olivia, God." "Do you hear yourself?" He pushed away from the counter, pacing like he couldn't bear to stay still. "I'm working my tail off trying to build a future, and you're dragging us backward." I tried to explain that I hadn't chosen any of this, but the words barely made it out. He talked over me louder each time until the walls themselves seemed to flinch. "You know what Marcus said," Daniel continued. "He said your parents were being practical. They knew who the real investment was." My heart stopped. He said it so casually, like the cruelty was a fact he was simply repeating. All the years of swallowed disappointment came rushing up at once, sitting in bleachers alone at Marcus's games, pretending I wasn't hurt when my father forgot my birthday hearing relatives joke that I was the sensible one, which was just another way of saying the forgettable one. Daniel wasn't done. "You need to wake up," he said, voice dropping to a hiss. "You'll never amount to anything if you keep living like this. No ambition, no drive. Just settling." The word settling hit harder than anything else. Settling was what I had done my whole life. Settling to make everyone comfortable. Settling to avoid conflict. Settling because being the quiet, reliable one felt safer than proving I was worth more. He stepped closer, frustration radiating off him. Do you think I want to marry someone who brings nothing to the table? Someone who's always second place in her own family? I felt something inside me crack. Not anger cracks don't explode. They split slowly, cleanly in silence. "That's not fair," I whispered. He scoffed. "Fair, Olivia, look at your life. You're almost 30. You have nothing, no savings, no real plan, no future. Your parents clearly saw that, and honestly, I'm starting to see it too. The worst part wasn't the words themselves. It was realizing he had probably believed them for a long time. The apartment felt smaller, the air too thin. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, louder than his voice, louder than everything. For a moment, I thought about defending myself, telling him about the nights I stayed late at work, the sacrifices I made the way I held us together when he doubted himself. But I knew it wouldn't matter. People like Daniel didn't listen. They measured worth in trophies and inheritances, and I had neither. He grabbed his coat, his movements sharp and final. "I'm not signing up for this," he said. "I'm not tying myself to someone who can't keep up. Not when your own parents didn't think you were worth more than a broken cabin." He opened the door, turned back, and delivered the line that would follow me for days. "You're a pathetic loser, Olivia." Then the door slammed, and the silence that followed cut deeper than his words ever could. I sat on the kitchen floor long after Daniel's footsteps faded down the hallway. The ring he threw lay near the leg of a chair, catching the weak light from the window. I didn't move to pick it up. I couldn't. My hands felt heavy, as if lifting them would admit that everything he said was true. The silence in the apartment pressed in on me, thick and suffocating, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone laughing in the hallway. Life went on out there. Mine felt like it had stopped. His words replayed in my head, looping so clearly it felt like he was still standing over me. Pathetic loser. Never amount to anything. No future. Each one dropped into my chest like a stone sinking deeper every time I breathed. And beneath it all, the sharper, quieter pain, he wasn't the first to say something like that. Just the first to say it out loud. I curled my knees to my chest, pressing my forehead against them, and for the first time in years, I cried without trying to hide it. Not polite tears, not the kind you blink away before anyone notices. This was the kind that came from years of swallowing things whole, my father's dismissiveness, Marcus's smug victories, relatives' well-meaning comments about how practical I was, and now this. The final proof, apparently, that everyone else had been right about me all along. When the tears stopped, the apartment felt even colder. I stood, slowly grabbed a towel, and wiped my face as if cleaning away the last trace of a life that didn't fit anymore. My reflection in the microwave door looked hollow but not destroyed. Something inside me had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, the kind of shift that comes not from anger, but from hitting a limit so absolute there's nowhere left to go but forward. I walked into the bedroom, opened my laptop, and hovered over Daniel's contact photo glowing on the screen. For years, I'd shaped myself around that man's expectations, convincing myself that love meant adjusting, softening, shrinking. But the truth sat heavy and undeniable now. Love shouldn't make you smaller. And if it did, then losing it wasn't a loss at all. I closed the laptop and opened a travel site instead. I typed in one destination, Alaska. The idea felt ridiculous at first. A cabin in the middle of nowhere in winter. But the longer I stared at the screen, the more the thought solidified. I couldn't fix anything from this apartment. I couldn't breathe here. I couldn't stay one more night in the place where my future had been torn apart like it was nothing. If that broken cabin was all my parents thought I was worth, then I needed to see it with my own eyes. I booked a one-way ticket. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase and left the ring on the table without a note. The flight was small, loud, and shaky, rattling through gray clouds. Hours later, a driver in an old truck carried me down narrow, icy roads where the world felt untouched. When he finally stopped, he pointed toward a dark stretch of trees. "Cabin's about a mile that way," he said. I stepped out into the cold, the wind cutting through every layer I wore. I could barely see the roof through the branches as I approached it. The place looked exactly like what everyone thought of me, forgotten, weathered, barely holding together. I put my hand on the door. The cabin door resisted me, swollen from years of snow and neglect. When it finally lurched open, a blast of cold air and the sharp scent of wet wood slapped me across the face. For a second, I just stood there, letting the darkness swallow me whole. This was my inheritance, my value according to everyone who ever claimed to love me. Inside, the place sagged under its own weight. Floorboards, bowed walls warped, and a broken window let a thin veil of snow drift across the rotting floor. A chair lay collapsed in the corner like it had given up long before I arrived. My boots echoed softly, each step stirring dust that glittered in the weak light. I wrapped my arms around myself. "This is what I was worth," I whispered, but the silence didn't answer. It never had. I set my bag down and began moving debris. I didn't fully know why, maybe instinct, maybe the desperate need to control one tiny part of my life. I cleared a corner, then another, until sweat mixed with the cold on my skin. As I swept a wide patch of floor near the center of the room, the broom hit something uneven beneath the old rug. I froze. I crouched, pulled the rug back, and dust exploded upward. Under it lay a wooden hatch with a small iron ring sunk flush into the boards. My heartbeat quickened. I hesitated. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was dangerous. But something inside me, some quiet, persistent instinct, pushed past the fear. I pulled the ring. The hatch groaned open, releasing a wave of cold air from below. A narrow stairway disappeared into darkness. I grabbed my flashlight, clicked it on, and descended carefully, each step whining beneath my weight. At the bottom, my boots hit packed earth. The beam of light shook in my hand as I swept it across the room, and my breath caught. Crates, dozens of them, stacked neatly, deliberately. Heavy wooden boxes reinforced with metal, untouched by time, except for a thick coat of dust. A large trunk sat in the corner like a final secret. My hands were trembling when I approached the nearest crate. I found a rusted piece of metal on the ground and wedged it under the lid, forcing it upward until the wood cracked. Inside were tightly wrapped cloth bundles. I picked one up, unwrapped it, and gold coins spilled into my palm, cold and impossibly bright. My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened another bundle, jewelry, antique pieces with stones that glowed under the shaking flashlight beam. Another silver bars stamped with dates from decades ago. I stepped back, breath shallow. The cold air bit into my lungs, but I barely felt it. There was wealth here, immense, staggering wealth. I turned in a slow circle, the flashlight catching edges of metal glints of gold-stacked crates filled with everything. My pulse roared in my ears. I whispered to the darkness, "What did you leave me?" I moved toward the trunk in the corner, hands shaking harder with every step. I lifted the lid. Inside were ledgers, old brittle pages, lists of payments, land rights, resource claims. My family name appeared over and over: timber rights, mineral rights, contracts worth more than anything Marcus had ever bragged about. Under a stack of pages, I saw an envelope. My name written across the front in faded, familiar handwriting. My knees nearly buckled. I opened it carefully. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, and my mother's voice filled the room, even though she was gone. "Olivia, if you are reading this, your father and I are no longer with you. I need you to understand something we never said enough. We saw strength in you, not loud, not showy, but deep. You care about people, about integrity, about legacy. Marcus cares about how things look. You care about what they mean. This cabin holds our family's true inheritance. We gave Marcus the home he could show the world, because that is what he understands. But this history, these rights, this responsibility belongs with you. We trust your heart. Please remember that. Love, Mom." I pressed the letter to my chest as tears blurred the ink. The air around me felt warmer, or maybe that was just the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in years being seen. All those nights I thought my parents dismissed me. All those moments I believed Marcus was chosen because he was better. All the times Daniel made me feel small, like I was meant to stay behind while he ran ahead. They had never seen me that way. My parents had trusted me with everything they couldn't say out loud. I wiped my eyes and looked around the cellar. The fortune wasn't just money. It was a message, a confirmation, a rebirth. I picked up a gold coin, feeling its weight settle into my palm. A laugh escaped me, quiet, shaky, but real. I wasn't the mistake I whispered. I wasn't the afterthought. The cabin above creaked softly, but now it sounded different. Not like a warning, like an acknowledgement. I climbed the stairs slowly, carrying the letter like it was part of my heartbeat. When I reached the main room again, the wind rattled the broken window, sending a curl of snow onto the floor. I stood in the center of the cabin, breathing deeply, letting everything settle: the betrayal, the discovery, the truth. Daniel's voice flashed in my mind: pathetic loser. Marcus's smirk at the attorney's office. Years of whispers telling me I was less. I exhaled. They were wrong. For the first time in my life, I felt it: not anger, not revenge, but power. Quiet, steady, undeniable power. The kind you don't announce, the kind you carry. And the cabin, broken and cold, no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like a beginning. I spent the next 2 days cataloging everything in the cellar, my notebook filling with values, dates, and resource rights that could reshape my entire future. I contacted experts under a different name, careful and quiet, making sure no one, not Marcus, not Daniel, caught even a whisper of what lay beneath the cabin. Each confirmation I received felt like another anchor settling inside me. Marcus called twice, bragging about the sunlight in his new mansion. I let the calls ring out. Daniel sent a message saying he missed me and wanted to talk. I deleted it without opening it. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their expectations. I was choosing my own direction. I wasn't the overlooked daughter anymore. I wasn't anyone's second option. I was the one holding the real legacy. I left Alaska with my mother's letter tucked safely in my bag and a steadiness in my chest I had never felt before. The world hadn't changed. Marcus still flaunted his mansion. Daniel still chased appearances, but I had. The cabin hadn't broken me. It rebuilt me into someone who no longer needed their approval to stand tall. If you were the one who opened that trapdoor and found the truth buried beneath your past, what would you have done? If this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.